Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take your essential source material, dive deep into the analysis, and really extract the fundamental knowledge you need to move forward.
Great to be here.
Today we're focusing on something that is just. It's absolutely foundational to long-term stability and happiness. We're talking about the sophisticated skill of managing upsetting emotional states.
It really is. I mean, you could almost call it the essential prerequisite for any kind of sustainable progress.
And our listener has provided some really incredible sources that focus very acutely on identifying, labeling, and then actively coping with the feelings that so frequently create these massive difficulties in recovery.
Right. We're talking about the core emotional triggers. The deep-seated stuff like anger, anxiety, boredom, and shame. These are the feelings that they can ambush your stability months or even years into the process if they aren't managed proactively.
Okay, so that immediately frames our mission for this deep dive. We need to define the core problem. So when we talk about these upsetting emotions, anger, anxiety, boredom, depression, guilt, shame, we're not just talking about, a minor inconvenience or a bad mood.
No, not at all. The source material establishes them as the most common obstacles people face. They often lead to a real fork in the road where stability is just severely tested.
And we have to establish the stakes right away because they're high.
They're incredibly high.
Hmm.
Mismanaged feelings don't just lead to personal unhappiness. I mean, they directly contribute to regression, to relapse, and they cause this corrosive strain on your relationships.
Making it hard to reconnect with people.
Exactly. It makes it incredibly difficult to navigate the world. For instance, if a feeling of, say, pervasive sadness continues over time and it just doesn't lift, it's no longer a transient emotional state. It transitions into what is clinically called a mood disorder.
And that's a clear indicator of something more serious?
It's a clear indicator of a treatable psychiatric condition. And that line between just feeling sad and having a depressive disorder is often crossed simply because the underlying emotional management skills haven't been developed yet.
Okay, drilling into that point, we have to talk about the substance paradox. This is fascinating because it's what drove the initial behavior in the first place, right?
It often is.
In the beginning, many people deliberately use alcohol or other drugs specifically to cover up difficult feelings. They're looking for elimination or masking or just, a temporary escape from that emotional pain.
But the sources reveal this surprising and frankly dangerous twist. The substance doesn't eliminate the feeling.
It makes it worse.
It often makes the underlying emotion dramatically worse. It grossly exaggerates or distorts it. You see, the substance interferes with the central nervous systems, the CNS's ability to regulate and modulate emotion. So instead of turning the volume down, it's like it puts the feeling through a distorted amplifier.
The specific examples in the sources they were jarring. Because we aren't talking about minor emotional shifts here.
No, we're not.
We're talking about fundamental personality changes driven by intoxication. The source says that under the influence, a mild irritation, the kind of small annoyance we all feel every day, can suddenly spiral into passionate hatred or even outright violence.
The filter is just gone.
And on the flip side.
And think about the flip side. Simple attraction can morph instantly into this unremitting, all-consuming love. The substance interferes with cognitive judgment, and it exacerbates the feelings until they're not only unrecognizable, but actively harmful to yourself and to others.
So it promises peace.
But it delivers anarchy, emotional chaos.
So if the sources show that the very thing used to solve emotional pain, the substance use, actually makes the emotional state worse, then the path forward has to be highly intentional emotional development.
It has to be.
So our mission today is laid out in the material. First, we're going to dedicate significant time to understanding why these 6 core emotions act as such substantial roadblocks to stability.
Then we'll do a detailed, layered examination of those most common, upsetting emotional states.
And finally, we'll review the specific practical strategies. There's a detailed 11-point toolkit here for proactive coping and, crucially, for increasing the intentional sharing of positive emotions.
We're moving from the diagnosis of the problem to the highly practical execution of the solution.
Exactly. To break that down, let's begin with the specific emotional states that so often trip people up. Let's start with the one that's maybe the most outwardly destructive and relationship straining. Anger.
The material makes a really strong case that difficulty handling angry feelings is, well, It's often cited as one of the single biggest threats and roadblocks to successful recovery.
It's an emotion that just demands immediate control.
It really does.
Oh.
And the sources detail two classic counterproductive ways this manifests. Both are damaging.
Right. You see these two extreme reactions, and they're both equally damaging to your internal stability and your external relationships.
What's the first one?
So on one side, you've got the person who expresses anger far too freely and inappropriately. The explosion.
Hostility, aggression.
Exactly. We're talking about hostility, aggression, even violence. They're just letting it all hang out without a filter, without thinking through the consequences. And that inevitably destroys trust and goodwill.
And it pushes away the very people who are trying to support their recovery.
Right. And then what's on the other side of that coin?
On the other side, you have the person who suppresses the anger, they avoid expressing it directly, or they default to passive aggression. That's the implosion.
So the anger just builds up inside.
It builds up, stewing for days or weeks, creating this chronic resentment and physical tension. And the material is clear. Both of these extremes, the explosion or the implosion, they contribute equally to personal unhappiness and deeply strained relationships.
So for someone listening who really identifies with that suppression model, what's a safe first step they can take to learn healthy sharing without just immediately flipping to an explosion? Because after years of suppression, they might not even know what controlled expression looks like.
That's a powerful question. And the first step is always recognition, which we'll get into more later. But for anger specifically, the immediate need is validation without action.
Okay, so feel it, but don't act on it.
Exactly. The goal isn't to become some kind of emotional zombie who never feels anger. The goal is control, to think before you act. The key is gaining control over the expression of your anger.
So if you're the suppressing type.
If you're the suppressing type, you need to give yourself permission to just acknowledge the angry feeling. Maybe write it down privately. And then learn healthy ways of sharing that anger appropriately with others. Start with a trusted therapist or a sponsor, maybe, before you ever confront the person who caused the anger.
That makes the process safe. You're practicing the telling without the reacting.
Precisely.
Okay, but here's where the analysis gets really critical, because often anger isn't even the real problem. It's a secondary emotion.
Exactly. Anger is frequently a label we just slap on what we're actually feeling underneath. Think of anger as a protective shell.
A shell for what?
Underneath that feeling might be hurt or disappointment or fear or just profound vulnerability. If you allow yourself to feel and label that primary emotion, the anger often subsides because its job as a protective shield is no longer necessary.
So if I'm angry because, say, my partner forgot my birthday, the deeper, more vulnerable feeling is disappointment that my expectations weren't met.
And hurt.
And hurt that I felt disregarded. So if I can learn to manage that disappointment first, the anger might just diminish.
It often diminishes significantly because you haven't let the situation escalate to a perceived personal attack. Learning to manage anger enhances recovery not just by changing the behavior, not shouting or suppressing, but by teaching you to deal with that underlying disappointment or hurt.
The thing you initially mislabeled.
The thing you mislabeled and tried to hide. It requires peeling back the emotional layers to find the true source of the pain. The moment you can acknowledge, I am hurt, you can communicate that need, rather than just communicating, I am mad.
Okay, let's shift gears to one of the most common internal struggles, anxiety and worry. The sources confirm this is highly prevalent, especially in the early stages of recovery. And for some people, this feeling of constant edginess, the feeling that something bad is about to happen, it can persist for months.
It's so pervasive because the nervous system is still healing. The material treats anxiety and worry as two sides of the same coin, and it emphasizes the distinct physical and mental components.
Right, so what's the physical side?
The physical side is what you feel in your body. It's those immediate, undeniable sensations.
Yeah.
Sweaty palms, a fast racing heartbeat, shallow breathing, muscle tension, or just a generalized edginess.
The fight or flight response.
That's the physiological manifestation of it, yes. And then the mental side is the excessive concern you have about a perceived threat, an event, or a situation, whether it's happening now or you think it might happen.
And we need to specifically define anticipatory anxiety here. This is the fear that something might happen. The focus is almost entirely on an imagined, often negative future outcome.
Yes. It's catastrophic thinking. It paralyzes you today based on a fear of tomorrow.
And the material gives some really relatable examples of this.
It does. It could be worrying about not getting a job before you even submit the application, or fearing rejection before you ask someone out on a date,
On the more severe end, it's that debilitating fear of having a panic attack in public.
which can lead to avoiding leaving your house altogether. The key issue is that this fear prevents you from engaging with life now. You're living in a hypothetical future of failure,
And that often creates a reinforcing cycle, doesn't it? The thought causes the physical feeling, like the fast heart rate,
which you then interpret as evidence that the negative outcome's real.
which in turn just ramps up the anxiety even more.
That is the anxiety loop, perfectly described. And that constant state of alert just drains your mental and emotional energy.
So the source material draws a really important line here.
It does. If this anxiety and worry become so severe that they lead to serious personal distress or start interfering with your daily functioning, making you avoid people or situations or events crucial to your stability, that's when it crosses a boundary.
And that's when it demands clinical attention.
Yes. If that intense level of anxiety persists despite being sober and it starts interfering with your ability to function, it may be a symptom of an underlying psychiatric disorder, completely independent of the substance use itself.
So that's the actionable step.
That's the actionable step here. If anxiety and worry remain a significant problem for more than a few weeks after the initial withdrawal period is over, it signals the need for a professional evaluation.
You need to talk to someone.
You should consult with a therapist or a mental health professional. They can determine if you have one of the more serious anxiety disorders, like panic disorder, agoraphobia, or generalized anxiety disorder, GAD.
And GAD?
Yeah, exactly.
GAD is characterized by excessive, uncontrollable worry about multiple things, multiple events or activities, and it occurs most days for at least 6 months.
And these specialized conditions, they benefit from specific targeted treatment.
Absolutely. They can significantly benefit from specialized treatment. That might involve cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to challenge those thought loops, or certain non-addictive medications designed specifically to manage the biological component of the anxiety symptoms.
Which then allows the psychological work to actually take root.
Exactly. Seeking that help is a sign of strength. It's not a weakness.
All right, now let's address what can feel like an existential vacuum, boredom, and emptiness. For so many people, living without substances means losing a massive part of their daily life.
And that loss isn't just the substance itself. It's the whole routine of acquiring it, preparing it, using it, and recovering from it. That entire structure is just gone.
It's a huge void.
And so the straight life can initially feel draggy, slow, and profoundly boring.
You've hit on such a critical point, the time sink of addiction. Addiction often provided a massive, demanding structure, even if it was a negative one.
You spent hours just thinking about it.
Hours thinking about the next fix, planning the use, executing the use, and then recovering. When that purpose, however destructive, is removed, the sheer vacuum of time is frightening.
Which leads to a massive recovery requirement.
Which is relearning how to have fun and developing new, meaningful interests without relying on alcohol or drugs.
And the source material draws an important and necessary distinction here between temporary boredom and habitual boredom.
Yes, this is key. Temporary boredom makes complete sense in response to life changes. You quit a job, you end a relationship, you move, and you're temporarily bored while you adjust.
But habitual boredom is more insidious.
Far more insidious. It's having difficulty enjoying activities at all without substances. It's the sense that everything sober is muted or gray or just unsatisfying. This chronic state of low-grade dissatisfaction is highly dangerous.
And that habitual dissatisfaction is where the warning comes in about stability. The material cautions against making hasty decisions.
Precisely. Hasty decisions about your job, your relationships, your social activities, they should generally be avoided unless absolutely necessary, especially in early recovery.
Why is that?
Well, if you rush into a major life change, say moving across the country, and then you return to feeling bored and unsatisfied because you haven't dealt with the core emotional void,
Then the old solution starts to look good again.
the old destructive option, returning to enjoying life via substances, can suddenly seem appealing again. And that can lead to severe long-term problems. The stability of your life structure has to be paramount while you're building that internal skill set.
Okay, so related to boredom is the concept of emptiness. Can you define this feeling for us?
Emptiness refers to feelings of having a void or a hole inside. It's a sense that nothing truly satisfies you or connects you to the world. and it's often linked to a lack of intrinsic meaning.
And it doesn't always show up right away.
No. Sometimes this emptiness doesn't appear until months into sobriety, when the initial rush and excitement of recovery wears off, and the listener is left asking that scary, destabilizing question, is this all there is?
That "is this all there is" moment. It suggests that the substance use was masking a really fundamental issue with connection or identity.
That's the key. It suggests you may be discovering that the sobriety has cracked open an existing void, and that nothing in your current life seems to have much inherent value or meaning for you.
And when that feeling persists.
Persistent emptiness that lasts several months can be a symptom of a chronic depressive disorder, or critically, it's often a core feature of borderline personality disorder, or BPD.
And in the context of BPD, what's that linked to?
In BPD, this emptiness is linked to identity instability. The person feels profoundly hollow because they lack a solid sense of self, and they use substances or relationships to try and fill that bottomless void.
So once again, the actionable step here is crucial. If that deep, pervasive emptiness persists for months, professional treatment, not just recovery meetings, is necessary.
Absolutely. Therapy, specialized medications, or both are often required to address these potential dual diagnoses effectively. You need expert help to develop a robust sense of self and meaning if that void persists. So depression is a frequent companion to substance use disorder and recovery, and is really critical to understand its sources according to the material. It's often fueled by three distinct factors.
Okay, what are those three causes and how do they differ?
Well, the first two are primarily physiological and relate to the substance use itself. First, you have the acute and chronic effects of alcohol or other drugs on the central nervous system.
So for example,
If you use stimulants, your brain's dopamine and norepinephrine reserves get depleted, leading to a biological crash. If you used alcohol, which is a CNS depressant, the brain's attempt to stabilize often leaves you with a rebound depression.
okay, and the second cause?
The second is the resulting withdrawal symptoms when use stops. Even protracted withdrawal can include depressive symptoms.
And the third cause is purely psychological and situational.
That's right. Psychological trauma associated with losses or giving up things that were once highly important in your life. We often experience profound sadness and depressed feelings when we closely examine our life and truly internalize how substance use has caused severe problems, strained relationships, and led to irrecoverable losses.
And that grief is a natural, healthy response to the reality of the past.
It is, but it's important to differentiate between those transient feelings of sadness, loss, or regret that may naturally go away after you stop substance use, and persistent clinical depression.
Because the sources warn that unaddressed depression, even if it was initially caused by the substance effects, represents an extremely high risk for relapse if it's not dealt with effectively.
The critical line is persistence, paired with specific, clustered symptoms.
Okay, what are those symptoms?
If depression continues for weeks or months of total abstinence, and it's accompanied by multiple key diagnostic symptoms, problems with sleep, a significant change in appetite or weight, drastically reduced energy or fatigue, poor concentration, anhedonia.
Anhedonia being the inability to experience pleasure.
Correct. Or persistent, hopeless feelings about the future, or most critically, thoughts of suicide or self-harm, then immediate specialist mental health treatment is necessary.
So if your current therapist or recovery community isn't qualified to assess and treat clinical depression, you have to ask for assistance in finding a mental health professional who is.
Absolutely. That is an immediate priority. This is non-negotiable for long-term safety.
But the good news here needs to be reinforced.
Yes. The good news is that all types of clinical depression are highly treatable. The available treatments are comprehensive.
So what are those treatment options, and how do we contextualize them for the listener so they don't feel overwhelmed by them?
Well, they're multifaceted. There are various forms of effective therapy, different classes of medications designed to restore neurotransmitter balance, and for the most serious treatment-resistant cases, procedures like electroshock therapy or ECT are sometimes used.
Now, that's rare.
It is rare, and it's reserved for severe cases where other treatments have failed and life is in danger. Often, it's a combination of approaches tailored specifically to the individual's physiological and psychological needs. The key takeaway is that you do not have to live with persistent depression. Help is available.
Okay, this distinction between guilt and shame it's perhaps the most crucial for healing and for developing self-compassion, because they require fundamentally different internal management strategies. This is a point that needs real depth.
They absolutely do. Let's anchor this with the source's example. Guilt refers to feeling bad about your behaviors. It's about what you did or what you failed to do.
So like Jerry in the source material.
Exactly like Jerry. He felt guilty about specific actions, arguing with his wife, misusing family money, fighting with his brother while he was drunk, and getting arrested for DUI. These are discrete, accountable actions.
So guilt focuses outward on the action, the mistake, the doing, but shame focuses profoundly inward on identity, on the being.
That's right. Shame refers to feeling unworthy or bad about yourself. It's a feeling of being inherently defective, morally weak, fundamentally flawed, or just less than others precisely because of the substance use problem.
And this was expressed by Jack.
Powerfully expressed by Jack, who was addicted to heroin and cocaine, and he referred to himself as a no-good piece of shit. Shame is a global assessment of the self.
The why it matters here is so profound. It often dictates recovery success. Guilt focuses on specific actions, and specific actions can be changed. You can make amends, you can take accountability, you can change your behavior.
And motivating. If I feel guilty, I can do something to fix the mistake.
Whereas shame focuses on a core belief that you are defective. And that core identity belief is much harder to change without intense intervention and sustained self-compassion.
Shame is paralyzing. If you believe you are fundamentally a no-good piece of shit, why would you bother continuing to recover? That self-assessment is devastating and often serves as a precursor to relapse.
Because the person starts to think, I am worthless, so I might as well act worthless.
Exactly. So if the listener is dealing with guilt, the intervention is practical. Make amends, take action. If they're dealing with shame, the intervention is internal and psychological.
So things like learning self-compassion.
Practicing identity reconstruction and utilizing inner-directed activities to dismantle the belief that they are fundamentally bad. Both need careful management, but the energy of shame is often a bigger predictor of relapse because it equates recovery with trying to fix a broken identity, which just feels impossible.
So we need to help the listener shift from thinking, I am a mistake.
So I made a mistake. That's the difference between shame and guilt.
That's a powerful framework. So what does this all mean? Recognizing these 6 states, anger, anxiety, boredom, depression, guilt, and shame, and understanding their source and function is step 1. Step 2, which we move to now, is building the active, practical toolkit to manage them and prevent them from destabilizing your life. So we've identified the roadblocks in incredible detail. Now we're turning to the proactive strategies provided in the sources, a comprehensive list of 11 specific actions you could take immediately to move toward greater stability.
Right? These involve awareness, cognitive shifts, behavior changes, and fundamental structural adjustments.
Let's begin with the foundational steps. So, strategy 1, recognize your emotions. This sounds simplistic, but for someone coming out of addiction where feelings were habitually masked or suppressed, recognizing the onset of a feeling early is a high-level skill.
It's entirely preventative. And the technique often involves learning to read your own physiological signals. Before severe anger hits, you might feel a knot in your stomach or your jaw might tense up.
Or before deep anxiety sets in.
You might notice rapid, shallow breathing. Dealing with mild anger or a slight depressive mood is always exponentially easier than dealing with severe, chronic states that have built up over weeks or months.
So early recognition helps you catch the problems before they build up momentum.
Destructive momentum. Ask yourself regularly, what am I feeling right now, and where do I feel it in my body?
And that flows directly into the second foundational step. Strategy 2, accept your feelings. This is where a lot of people struggle because they want to judge their feelings as right or wrong or good or bad.
And you can't ethically or practically judge your feelings. Acceptance means acknowledging that if you feel something, whether it's fear, resentment, or genuine joy, is a real internal experience, and it belongs to you.
So what's the critical insight there?
The insight is that acceptance is letting your feelings affect you and then dealing with them skillfully. You might feel irrationally angry at a situation, but the feeling of anger itself is real and valid.
So even if your perception is off.
Even if your perception of a situation is inaccurate, maybe you misinterpreted a text message, the resulting anxiety you feel is neither right nor wrong. It is simply an internal reality that has to be processed without self-judgment. If you fight the feeling, you just add shame to the original emotion.
That distinction is paramount. You accept the feeling, but you don't necessarily accept the behavior that feeling might inspire.
Precisely.
Which logically leads us to strategy 3, know the causes. You have to figure out what contributed to that emotion.
Understanding the cause informs your entire coping strategy. It's like being a detective for your own mood. For example, if you find you're dealing with persistent anger, You might realize it stems from chronic sleep deprivation or an unsatisfying relationship or even just poor nutrition.
You track the feeling.
You track it. And if you consistently find that it spikes right before you have to interact with a specific person, then that person or that dynamic needs to be addressed.
But the nuance we discuss in the depression section is important here too, right? Not every negative emotion has an external cause that can be fixed.
Absolutely. You have to keep in mind the nuance that some forms of clinical depression or even generalized anxiety may not have an external trigger at all. They might be biological or endogenous.
So in those cases,
In those cases, knowing the cause guides you away from trying to fix an external problem that doesn't exist and towards seeking clinical intervention. The crucial step is moving from passive experience to active investigation. Hashtag 2.2, cognitive restructuring and communication. So next is strategy 4, challenge your thoughts. This is the core of cognitive restructuring, and it's vital because your conscious thinking contributes directly to upsetting emotions. The ultimate goal is to challenge the catastrophic, negative, or unrealistic beliefs that underlie those feelings.
this sounds like a mini lesson in basic cognitive therapy. How do we break down that challenging process for the listener?
Well, we can use the framework of the cognitive triad: event, thought, feelings, behavior. If the event is a job interview coming up, the negative thought might be, I won't get the job because I'm not smart enough,
And that generates the feeling of intense anxiety.
which then leads to the behavior procrastination or poor performance. The challenge involves isolating that middle step, the thought, and replacing those catastrophic beliefs with realistic, balanced affirmations.
Let's use that job interview example to make this concrete. So instead of letting that negative self-talk, I won't get the job, just spiral, how does a listener actively challenge that?
You question the evidence. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have that I am not qualified? Then ask, what is a more balanced or alternative thought? Instead of I won't get the job, you practice telling yourself things like, I am well qualified and I will do my best on this interview.
Or even, if I don't get this job, another opportunity will come?
Exactly.
Huh.
I have successfully interviewed before. Practice saying these thoughts out loud if you have to. This strategy directly helps to build comfort, confidence, and it significantly reduces the emotional intensity triggered by that negative belief loop. You're retraining your brain's interpretation system.
Then we have strategy 5, share your feelings. This is so simple but so powerful. It acts as a lock-in for the cognitive work you've just done. You just tell a trusted friend or a family member or sponsor exactly how you're feeling.
Putting those intense feelings, whether you feel furious, anxious, worried, or lonely, into words has a powerful, physically measurable effect. Verbalizing intense emotion actually reduces its raw intensity in the amygdala, the brain's emotional hub.
Because isolation just makes emotions grow.
It makes them grow disproportionately large and often irrational. Sharing shrinks them down to size and makes them manageable.
And it provides a second benefit too, perspective.
Absolutely. Sharing your feelings frequently provides you with an objective, outside perspective on the situation. Your trusted person can say, wait, what you're telling yourself isn't actually supported by the facts. This reduces the risk of inappropriate action based on your temporary, intense emotional state. Sharing is critical for accountability and for sanity. Hashtag 2.3, the power of positivity and structure. All right, strategy 6, increase positive emotions. This is not just a suggestion to look on the bright side. The source material frames this as a deliberate, essential, and scientific action. We're talking about actively generating and savoring positive emotions.
Like love, affection, joy, compassion.
Awe, hope, forgiveness, gratitude, all of them.
And this is where we hit on that fascinating psychological benchmark. Experts recommend aiming for a healthy ratio of 3 positive emotions to every 1 negative emotion, the 3.1 ratio. Wow, a 3-to-1 ratio. That's really specific. Why is that ratio so protective? And why is expressing it more important than just feeling it?
Well, that ratio, which is based on the work of positive psychologists like Barbara Fredrickson, represents a tipping point. Below that ratio, people tend to languish and decline. Above it, they thrive, they build resilience, and they develop cognitive flexibility.
So it's a buffer zone.
It provides a necessary buffer zone against the inevitable negative experiences of life.
So if I have a moment of irritation, that's 1 negative unit, I need to intentionally generate 3 moments of hope or joy or gratitude to maintain that protective ratio.
Exactly. And that's why expression is key. It's not enough to simply experience a positive emotion. You have to go beyond that and express it.
What do you mean? Keeping grateful feelings internal only benefits you momentarily. Expressing gratitude, by writing it down, telling someone, or actively savoring the moment, that reinforces the neural pathway, makes the emotion stick, and crucially, it strengthens your social bonds.
So it creates a positive loop.
It generates a positive loop between yourself and others, which is fundamentally protective against the isolation that fuels depression and anxiety. It's a deliberate action to rewire your outlook.
Okay, moving on to strategy 7. Build structure in your life. Structure, structure, structure. We talked about how the chaotic routine of addiction leaves this huge void.
And structure is the direct antidote to the boredom we discussed. It's also a massive aid in reducing both depression and anxiety.
Oh, so.
Structure combats the chaos that often defines the active use phase. For the listener, this means starting small and making commitments. Setting specific times and days for activities and strictly sticking to that structure helps you keep going when you feel low.
And it helps you find that you're no longer losing momentum. Exactly. The structure itself provides a reliable external framework when your internal feelings are turbulent and unreliable.
So what does that structure look like in practice for someone who's just starting out?
It doesn't have to be complicated. Start with foundational structure. A set wake-up and sleep hygiene is crucial. Commit to eating 3 structured meals at set times. Schedule your recovery meetings and treat those meetings like non-negotiable professional appointments.
And then you build from there.
Then you build in the other activities we're about to discuss. The goal is just to avoid large blocks of unstructured time where boredom and rumination can set in. You are replacing the chaotic structure of addiction with a stable, positive structure of recovery. Hashtag 2.4. Activities, mindfulness, and external support. Okay, strategy 8. Use physical and creative activities. This is about using your body and your mind to reduce tension, stress, and anxiety while simultaneously improving your self-image and boosting your internal biochemistry.
Right. These activities serve as a crucial distraction, but more importantly, they are a productive release valve for all that pent-up energy and stress. What are some specific examples the source recommends?
We're talking about sports, structured exercise, art, music, reading, writing, or any other creative endeavor that allows for healthy self-expression and mastery.
So when you exercise,
When you exercise, you're generating endorphins and endocannabinoids, natural internal compounds that elevate your mood and reduce stress. And when you engage in a creative activity like painting or learning an instrument, you're building self-efficacy,
proving to yourself you can do new things.
which directly counters that shame-driven belief that you are fundamentally defective.
Next up, strategy 9. Use inner-directed activities. So this includes time spent on meditation, mindfulness, or prayer.
These activities are particularly beneficial because they help you cope with negative feelings, and they help you feel more centered, energetic, positive, and reflective. They are specifically powerful tools for reducing guilt and shame,
Why guilt and shame in particular?
because those are feelings tied to the past.
So how does mindfulness specifically help dismantle those powerful emotional chains of guilt and shame?
Well, mindfulness is the non-judgmental observation of the present moment. If you are practicing mindfulness, you are focusing your attention squarely on the here and now, the sensation of your breath, the sound of the room, the feel of the chair.
So if you're focused on the now,
You're actively interrupting the rumination loops that fuel guilt dwelling on past errors and shame dwelling on perceived unworthiness. You're learning that while the past happened, the feeling of unworthiness does not define your current moment.
and prayer and reflection serve a similar purpose.
A very similar purpose.
Yeah.
They often provide a mechanism for releasing those overwhelming feelings of past transgression and finding a pathway to forgiveness and self-acceptance.
Then we have strategy 10. Set goals for yourself. Goals provide that crucial forward momentum that battles the hopelessness of depression and the stagnation of boredom.
Goals provide both incentive and structure. They keep the listener busy and focused on the future, which is inherently protective. We encourage setting a mix of short-term goals like daily structure, attending 3 meetings this week, and long-term goals.
Like a new career path or mending a relationship.
Finishing a degree. Achieving those short-term goals provides rapid, reinforcing successes that build confidence and counter the negative self-assessment of shame. If you are working towards something, you are actively creating a meaningful future.
Finally, we have to acknowledge strategy 11. Consider medication for persistent and severe anxiety or depression. This is a critical safety net and, honestly, often the most stigmatized tool in the kit.
It absolutely needs to be acknowledged and destigmatized. If severe feelings of anxiety or depression persist despite sobriety and continue for a month or more, or if they significantly interfere with your ability to function, if therapy and these other strategies are not fully resolving the problem, then you must pursue additional mental health care.
And the sources are really reassuring here.
They're highly reassuring in noting that non-addictive medicines are available to treat mental health problems that do not respond well to therapy alone.
So it's so important for the listener to internalize that medication, when it's needed, is not a failure of their recovery effort.
It is not a failure. It means using every tool available in the toolkit to stabilize a medical condition. Stabilization allows all the psychological and behavioral strategies we just discussed, sharing feelings, setting goals, building structure, to actually become effective.
Yeah.
You cannot build a stable house on unstable ground, and sometimes medication provides the necessary stabilization for the foundational work of recovery to happen. #tag outro.
This has been an incredibly detailed and, I hope, a deeply actionable deep dive. We've moved methodically from identifying the 6 key emotional roadblocks, anger, anxiety, boredom, depression, guilt, and shame, to reviewing a comprehensive 11-point strategy toolkit for proactive management.
Covering everything from the cognitive work of challenging negative thoughts to the physical act of building structure and practicing gratitude.
And this isn't just theoretical knowledge. The source material emphasizes application, and it includes a practical challenge that's derived from something called Worksheet 10.1.
Right. This is where the rubber meets the road. It forces the listener to personalize the information.
So what's the practical application you'd recommend for the listener to start with based on this deep dive?
The listener should use that framework to identify and rate their degree of difficulty coping with 8 specific feelings without using substances. Those are anxiety, worry, anger, boredom, depression, feeling empty, guilt, shame, and loneliness.
On a simple scale.
On a simple scale of 0 for none to 5 for severe difficulty.
Yeah.
Once you have honestly rated those, the key is to pick the top 1 or 2 areas where you struggle the most, maybe it's shame and anxiety, and immediately develop 3 specific coping strategies using the 11-point toolkit we discussed today.
So that active planning, targeting your highest risk areas, is crucial for stability. Don't try to fix all 6 emotions at once.
Exactly. Start where the need is greatest.
That's powerful, turning a comprehensive list into a highly personalized action plan. Now, let's leave you with one final provocative thought based on the source's most ambitious recommendation: the 3.1 ratio of positive to negative emotions.
That ratio is a high bar, and achieving it requires continuous conscious effort throughout every single day.
So how conscious are you currently of generating and expressing positive emotions? Things like love, hope, compassion, and gratitude. This is the ultimate behavioral change. If you were to track your emotional expressions today, would you meet that 3.1 threshold?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It is, and the sources suggest that this intentional creation and sharing of positive emotion isn't just about feeling good. It is an active, protective mechanism for enhancing and safeguarding your recovery against the intensity and recurrence of the negative states we discussed. It's a fundamental shift in how you engage with yourself and with the world.
Think of it as actively building your emotional reserves, ensuring you have enough positive currency to weather any storms.
Indeed. Thank you for sharing the source material for this deep dive. We hope this deep dive has provided you with the detailed analysis and the shortcut to stability you were looking for. We will see you on the next deep dive.